and we're on to our next topic. So today we're going to have Dr. Diane Harner take us through learnings and navigating of our brain. How many questions have we had? We've had so many over the series of our episodes so far. And we just really know that we want to talk more about what's going on up here. So who better to have than a neuroscientist, counselor, genius, extraordinaire, Dr. Diane Harner, and really get into the nitty-gritty of some of those hard, complex questions. So we're going to dip into the brain and we're going to go. What have we got first? Indecisiveness. What causes it? How can I improve it?
So this is probably one of my biggest bugbears with people, indecisiveness. I'm a very decisive person with pretty much everything. And I have never really understood indecisiveness. It frustrates me in people. But on the flip side, people look at me and don't understand how I can be so decisive. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing.
No, it's one of my bugbears too. So I find I'm so decisive on all serious topics. If you make me sit down and pick something off the menu, I can just change my mind 10 times.
Oh, no,
it's so annoying. I actually irritate the shit out of myself. So what is going on?
Yes.
Okay. So decision-making is a very cognitive task. So whenever we're trying to analyse a situation or take on new information in order to make a decision, it relies very heavily on the communication between different parts of our brain. So in order to make really good decisions, we need to be able to take on new information and figure out how it fits with our past experience and all of the knowledge that we have already. But the other part to decision making is that decisions are emotional.
So I knew that. I did know that because I've worked in
idea.
sales, and I know that it's an emotional response.
And the reason that we know that decisions are emotional is work that was done by Antonio Damasio, who's a neuroscientist. And he worked with people who had lesions in the orbitofrontal cortex of their brain. Now, this is a part of the brain that connects emotions
Where is that?
to goals, just at the behind your eyes.
Okay. And lesions meaning like cuts.
Yeah, some kind of lesion, whether it was a result of an injury or whether there was some other physiological or pathological process going on. And these people had the ability to analyse lots of information. Their IQ was not affected at all. So they would have all of this data and they could analyse it, for hours and hours, but they couldn't make a decision.
Oh.
And the reason they couldn't make a decision is because they didn't know how they felt about it.
Wow. Okay.
So it's nothing to do with I'm a perfection, so I must make sure that everything is fact-based. It is an emotional response. I had no idea of that.
Yeah, that's part of decision making. So the other thing that drives decision making is what you've just touched on, actually. When we make a decision, or when we have indecision, it can be because we're afraid of making a mistake or having regret about our decision, which is a negative emotion. So if we have perfectionist tendencies and we have that negative perfectionism that we talked about last time, which is a fear of making mistakes, this can increase our indecision, because if we make the wrong decision, it may be a mistake.
How do we improve it? Because I know a few of my friends and they talk about, how do I improve my decision making? How do I get a bit better? I'm sick of, they get sick of being in that sort of paralysis of decision making, especially on more serious topics. What are the sort of things that we could be doing to help that?
So one of the things that we do that we feel might help us to make a decision is to gather more information. So if we feel that we can't make a decision, we go and research and we try to find more information. But what more information gives us is more choice. And so what comes out of that is the paradox of choice, which is when we have more options, we feel even more hamstrung about making a decision. Because the more options we have, the way that we interpret that is we have less freedom. and having less freedom makes us feel unhappier. So you talked about going to a restaurant before, and when you've got those menus that have 20 to 30 items that you can choose from, it's really, really difficult to make a choice because emotionally you might feel like, oh yes, I'd really love the chicken, or I'd really love the beef or the seafood or whatever is on the list. So what you're trying to avoid there is regret. Oh, what if I have the chicken and somebody else gets the beef and it looks tastier?
Is this why I love a specials board? Because there's 3 or 4 things on it and I always look at the special, and I usually will always pick one thing off the specials board.
Right.
Because I always think it's a special. It's not going to be there next time. So that makes it easier.
The conclusion's easier.
Yeah. And I do it all the time. And there's 4 things, usually 4 or 5. And I'll pick my favourite thing. And in a restaurant, I need to look at the menu for 30 seconds. I can choose straight away.
Yes.
And then I resort to the same thing. I eat the same thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because I have fear that I'm going to regret.
Because I really just don't want to make a decision anymore.
Yeah. So we go to what's familiar.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because it's a tried and true decision.
Yeah.
You know that you will be happy if you choose that.
Yeah, no regret.
No regret.
No fear of missing out either.
So when you go to a really high-end restaurant and there are only 2 or 3 options, it's much easier to make a decision.
Yeah.
I want to add on just one more thing about decision making, which is the way that we make decisions is affected by the way that we're raised through our upbringing. If our decisions as a child had negative consequences or were not validated by the people around us, we lose confidence in our ability to make accurate decisions.
Right.
And so this can come through to the decisions we make in our adult life as well.
This is interesting. Okay, so if I had a parent, not saying this is my scenario, if I had a parent who I had a negative consequence, a smack or whatever it may be, when I made the wrong decision or an emotional reaction of some kind, that's the kind of example where you've built that sort of pattern now to have a fear of making a decision which could drive you indecisiveness.
Yeah. So our brain pays attention to negative consequences. It's the way that we keep ourselves safe, especially if those consequences are highly emotional. So we remember highly emotional incidents more easily than we remember things that weren't emotional. But, if as a child, if you made a decision to, go and ride a bike, but your parents said to you, oh, are you really sure that you want to do that? Why don't you jump on the trampoline instead? Then that can devalidate or invalidate, I should say, your ability to make a decision.
Isn't that interesting?
So, and I think that might be why I'm quite decisive then, because I had the opposite of that.
Free fall. Independent.
Yeah, but also just the decisions that I had to make as a young person were good. I was rewarded for those. And so I think that, I don't know, I just have no issue. I have no issue in making decisions, but I know a lot of people who do, but you're definitely right when you talk about too many options. Yeah. And I think, for just in practical matters for people who are listening that might be indecisive, trying not to keep going down the rabbit hole of exploring because you will just get lost.
Well, that's what I tell my friends. So I go, when she asks me, oh, how do you make such quick decisions? I say, this is what I do. I write down 3 pros, 3 cons, or I just list it in my head, or I have to write it down if I need to, and I time cap myself. So it's like shit or get off the pot. Because you just kind of got to lock yourself in, and then you weigh up the risks. Yeah. So you can have a cap, you can weigh up the risks of both options or 3 options, and then can you live with that? And if you can live with that, then just make the decision, because you're losing time, and time is precious.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, how about the next question? Over to you, Laura.
Okay, perfect. Right, what have we got? How can I build my self-awareness? And so we have spoken a lot about this with you previously, around this being your superpower, I think is how you spoke about this last time.
Yes.
And it certainly does set you up for success when you can tap into your self-awareness. But how do you, if you're someone who isn't self-aware, actually the very notion of you thinking that about
Not
yourself
self-aware,
means
you're
that
not
you
gonna
are
think about it.
self-aware. Yeah. But how do you look at yourself and think, okay, how can I actually build this muscle here, and what can I do?
And maybe what is self-awareness?
Yes. Okay, so the first thing that I want to say about this is that 95% of the decisions that we make every day are subconscious. So every day we go through automatic routines, running automatic behavioural scripts, and we don't pause to really consciously think about whether the actions that we're taking, whether the responses that we're making are actually serving us. So what self-awareness does is that it introduces that moment of pause to just check in, to see whether the behavioural scripts we're running or the automatic responses are actually appropriate for the situation. Now, in order to have that pause, you need to have the ability to regulate emotions. And emotions first come from our body, actually. We experience emotions in our body before they become a cognitive conscious thought. So the first key to self-awareness is actually really creating that connection with your body and being able to check in to see how your body is responding to a situation. So when we respond in a negative sort of emotional way, it's often a function of our limbic system and particularly our amygdala, which is our fight, flight or fright response, where it comes from. And so when we have an emotional reaction in a negative way, we usually feel our heart rate increase or a respiration increase, or we might go flushed in the face, or we might get hands clammy. And being able to notice those things in your body then gives you the opportunity to pause before you make that automatic response.
So I never realized that before until we've spoken about it last time. So if I was someone who was not self-aware, could it be something that I say, how am I feeling right now? And try and not schedule that. That sounds terrible. But if I'm trying to build self-awareness, or I'm getting the same lesson coming back to me in life or at work, and I'm like, what's going on? And I have no idea, because that's why I think self-awareness benefits me. And I've created a pattern of doing that constantly, but that's probably because more of lack of confidence or wanting to go, oh my God, did I stuff up? So it's always checking in with myself. But if someone who's completely does not really have that auto routine going, what could be those types of things that they do? Is it going, oh, how am I feeling? Let me just check in with myself while you're just going about your day?
So it all comes back to mindfulness. About being present in this moment with yourself and being mindful about how you're thinking, how you're feeling. Mindfulness doesn't come easily to a lot of us. It's something that we actually need to practice. It's like a muscle that we need to exercise. So practicing mindfulness throughout the day is simply just pausing and being in direct experience with your senses. So noticing what you can see, what you can taste, what you can feel, what you can hear in your surroundings. And it also means checking in with how your body is feeling. So we have a skill called interoception, which is essentially our ability to notice how our body feels. And when we're being mindful, we can practice interoception and we can really check in with the signals that our body is giving us.
And I think, some examples of where I think a lot of people will lose that ability to do that. It's when you are busy and you're running around through your day. I mean, I remember so many times looking up and seeing the clock and it was 3:00 and I hadn't eaten anything. And then I'd be like, oh, yeah, I am. I'm hungry. But I hadn't even felt the hunger because I've been
running.
Yeah. And
so
just
cognitive.
so unmindful. How do you, so when it comes to, I guess, trying to build self-awareness into your day and like you said, practice mindfulness. Once you're aware and you've got that pause, what are sort of some of the questions that you could potentially ask yourself or be putting yourself through before making the next decision?
So the first thing is, how am I feeling right now? What is my body telling me? That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is to take notice of your thoughts. So our thoughts are actually what determine how we feel about something. And emotion is a physiological response. After emotion, we have thoughts. And thoughts then influence how we feel. So, for instance, if your heart is beating fast and your respiration is higher, that is an emotional response. But that emotion can be the same if you're afraid or if you're excited. It's actually the same chemical profile in terms of neurochemicals and hormones that elicit that response. So in a situation where you are about to get on a roller coaster, for some people, that feeling might be fear. For me, it would be fear. I do not want to get on that roller coaster, and therefore I feel afraid. But for somebody else who loves roller coasters, that emotion that they're having might be excitement. So it's actually the way that we think about our emotions that determine how we feel about a situation.
I used to have that conversation with people in sales before they picked up the phone to maybe speak to someone they'd never spoken to before, and to say it's how you look at it. Excitement is exactly the same. Your body's going through the same thing as you go through when it's fear, but you just have to see it differently.
You put a different label on it.
Yeah, it's opportunity.
Yeah.
The other end of that phone call could be an opportunity, or the other end of that phone call could be judgment, and it's all going to be horrible. But you don't know because you haven't done it yet. So it's about...
It's like when we talked about that public speaking with Steph Lay and confidence, how we said just before you get on stage and you feel that fear.
Yes.
But actually, and I always go, I tell myself, oh no, actually that's good. That nervousness is good because it means I care. Even though it's probably
Tell
I'm
yourself
just
you're excited.
petrified.
So the strategy that you're talking about now is called reappraisal.
Okay.
And it is a cognitive strategy for emotional regulation.
There you go. Perfect. Look at me, the genius. I had no bloody idea. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another Splash of Colour. Tune in next week for our next episode, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify or iTunes channel. Or you can always check us out on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn.